Good morning, everybody. I'm Rachel Stephen-Smith. I'm the ACT Minister for Health, and I'm here with Dr. Karen Coleman, the Chief Health Officer, to provide the COVID-19 update for today. So we have 38 new cases in the ACT today. 24 are linked to current exposure sites or are identified close contacts. 14 are under early investigation. 14 were in quarantine during their entire infectious period. At least 16 spent part of their infectious period in the community. At the moment, or overnight, as of 8 p.m. last night, 14 people were hospitalised, with 5 in intensive care and 3 requiring ventilation. While it is encouraging to see a slight reduction in today's case number, or a reasonably significant reduction from 52 over the last few days, it's still above what we've been seeing for the majority of this outbreak. And while cases continue to be largely related to essential workers, close contacts and household contacts, the number of people who have been infectious in the community for part of their potentially infectious period is a reminder that we all need to take care. We know from examples interstate